like global pandemics. I don't like them any better than the next person. But sitting home in my easy chair with my animals around me and getting together with all of you from here so works for me.
No,
Oh man, to me, this is such an improvement over taking a plane to New Jersey to talk to a group for an hour.
I totally understand.
Yeah.
Okay, should I go ahead?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. So
I
this
like
is
pandemic. I don't like them any better than the.
Oh, my bad.
Oh yeah. I don't need to hear me. I hear me all the time.
Okay, I think you're good.
Okay, let's see how we do. Okay, so this is, my apologies to people who maybe have already read this. This is Brave Girl, Quiet Girl. I'm actually not starting from the first chapter. I'm actually reading chapter 2. I'm reading Molly instead of Brooke. It just works better. It just for a little piece of something that'll just leave you where I want to leave you. This just works better. So this is chapter 2, Molly, and it's titled Because of a Banana. I just wanted a damn banana, and I just had this feeling like it was not too much to ask from my life. Like life owed me one little stinking banana after everything else it gave me. It was dark, but I didn't know how late it was, just that it was dark, and I was walking back from the recycling place, but I only had $1.42. That's it. From a whole day of going around picking up bottles and cans, $1.42. It just wasn't a very good day recycling-wise. I stopped at the corner store and I was looking at everything they had to eat. And it was all the same crap I ate every day. Well, every day I was lucky enough to eat. Chips, jerky, but that's expensive. Nuts, but they're so salty. But at least they're pretty cheap and they have some protein. I looked up at the guy behind the counter who made me nervous. I sort of knew him, but not in a good way, because he used to offer me food and say he would trade me. I kept saying I had nothing to trade, and he would only laugh this creepy laugh, and he would never tell me straight out what he meant. After a while, it was my friend Bodie who told me what it meant. Bodie wanted to help me, so I went in and told the guy he was my boyfriend and threatened to beat him up, and after that, the guy was mostly just mean and rude to me. Bodie was not my boyfriend. He just said that to try to help. Anyway, the corner store guy still made me nervous. He was old and bald, literally old, not just old compared to me like everybody is, 70 maybe. So it was extra creepy when you thought about it. On the counter in front of him was a plastic container of bananas. They had never been there before, at least not that I'd ever noticed. They actually looked kind of disgusting because they were completely green. But all of a sudden, none of the other food in that place looked like food to me at all. It all sounded salty and dry and old and not fresh and not something I wanted, not even anything I could bring myself to choke down. I think I hadn't had a single fruit or vegetable since I left Utah with Bodie. I walked up to the counter, but I never took my eyes off the guy because he made me nervous. And he never took his eyes off me, believe me when I tell you that, but for different reasons. How much, I said, and pointed at the green bananas. $1.50. $1.50 for one banana? It's too much. Then don't buy one. But by then I wanted one so bad that it was more like I needed it. You know how that can happen? How all of a sudden a thing gets to me more than just the thing it is, and then all of a sudden it feels like everything that's wrong in your life. Not having bananas felt like everything that had gone wrong in my life since I'd had to leave home. And let me tell you, that's a whole big bag of wrong. He opened his mouth to say more, and I knew what he was going to say, so I walked out before he could. I have to be worth more than the price of a banana, even a too expensive one. And the day I lose that, I think I'd rather just be gone from this world. I decided to walk to the all-night market. Problem was, it was kind of a stupid idea because all of a sudden I was feeling it in every cell of my body how I'd been eating nothing but junk food. Empty calories, my mom would say. And feeling like I needed actual nutrition that my body could use for actual health, full calories. But at the same time, I knew it was a long walk to the all-night market, and by the time I got there and back, I would have walked off the calories 2 or 3 times over. But by then it was a thing I couldn't let go of in my head. I don't know how to explain it any better than that. So I got into the market, and right off the bat, this older lady in a company polo shirt and apron started following me around. And not on the sly either. Real obvious, like, here I am, you little punk kid, I'm watching everything you do. But I wasn't doing anything, so it made me mad. I was just walking over to the produce section to look at their bananas. And there's no law against doing that as far as I know. I found the bananas and I looked at them and they looked really nice and yellow and ripe, but not with brown spots yet. But I wasn't sure if it was okay to take one off the bunch. I turned around and that lady was still staring at me with her hands on her hips. Her face sat hard like she hated me. How can you do that to a person? Hate them when they haven't even done anything to you. I'm not going to steal, I said to her, real nice and loud. There was nobody else in the store to crane their necks around and wonder what we were fighting about, or at least not that I could see. It really sucks that you've already decided I'm going to steal and you don't even know me. That sucks, you know? I would never do that to you. Or actually, I'd never do it to anybody. She didn't bother to answer, just stared at me with her hands on her hips, which also sucked. They do this to you when they can tell you're on the street. The younger and dirtier you are, the more you get this everywhere you go. And I'm always thinking, damn it, I'm the same person I was when I lived at home with my parents, like a regular kid, like everybody else. But I can't show them that and they'll never see it and the whole thing just sucks. And by the way, I didn't ever steal. Bodie stole when he needed to, but I never ate anything he stole because it wouldn't have been right. I took my money out of my pocket, the dollar bill and the 42 cents and change, and I held it out for her to see, even though she was a pretty long way away. I have enough for a banana, I said, and I'm going to buy it. I'm not going to steal it. And I just need to know if it's okay to take one off the bunch and just buy the one. Probably should have just gone ahead and done it and not even stopped to ask, because I couldn't afford a whole bunch. And if she said no, I would have walked all the way for nothing. There are some loose ones there in the corner, she said, and pointed over to the left-hand side of the bin where the bananas, I can say bananas, were sitting. I found a real nice one and weighed it and looked at the price per pound and did the math in my head and figured out I can afford an apple too if I picked one out. And the whole time she never stopped staring at me. I got a Fuji because that's my favorite kind. I hadn't had a Fuji apple since I left Utah with Bodie. I took them both to the checkout counter and the woman took my money and asked me if I wanted a bag, but I said no because I figured they wouldn't last that long and it was just another thing to throw away. Just more trash on the street in LA, and I felt like I was living in a world overflowing with trash. Just as she handed me back my 18 cents change, I kind of dropped it into my hand so her clean hand didn't touch my dirty one. She said, "Sorry, hon," which I guess was nice. I said, "That's okay," but it wasn't completely true. I mean, it wasn't, but I figured it was better than if she hadn't said that. I ate the banana on the long walk back. I could never bring myself to call that place Bodie and I had been living home because that would have been ridiculous. It was never anybody's home and never would be. It was just a place to hide at night. It was good, the banana, I mean, but it didn't last long enough, and when it was gone, I wasn't sure it had been worth everything I'd gone through to get it. I dropped the peel into a trash bin on the corner because I don't like to litter. Not that one more piece of trash would make much difference around where we'd been living, but it was just a thing that mattered to me. I decided to save the apple, so I put it in the pocket of my pants, which was sort of a weird and bad thing because there shouldn't have been room for an apple in my pants pocket. When I left Utah, I would have had to mash an apple up into applesauce to get it to fit in the pocket of those pants. Then I looked up, and on the sidewalk on the next block, I saw something, but I didn't know what kind of a thing it was. It was under the street light, and it didn't look like trash. I walked closer and kept looking at it, and when I got closer, it started to look like a kid's car seat, like the kind my mom used to use with my little sisters to strap them proper into the car. I guess she used one with me too, but I was little, so I don't really remember. Anyway, here's the thing. It wasn't trash, or at least it didn't look like trash. It looked like a nice new one that nobody in their right mind would throw away, but I figured when I got closer, I would see a strap that got broken or some other thing that would explain why somebody pitched it. But this other little voice in my head said, no, maybe it's fine. Maybe it's a real find and maybe I could sell it, take it to a pawn shop or something. And Bodie and I could have the best meal we'd ever had since we'd known each other. I didn't know Bodie when I had a family and a house. Sometimes Bodie came back with money at night, but we never spent much of it on food. He was saving it up so we could get a real place to live. I knew it probably would never happen, but anyway, that was the plan. And it gave us a way to not be completely hopeless about everything. It was faced away from me, the car seat, so I was looking at the back of it, and that made it hard to know if it was a good find or not. Then I went to that place in my head where I got kind of frozen up inside, which I pretty much always did when I thought something good was about to happen. Because once you let yourself believe something good is about to happen, it can also not happen. Any idiot knows that. I got up to it and I looked down, and I was still kind of nervous because I was about to see if I'd found something worth real money or not. And then when I looked, I was shocked by what I saw, really shocked. This little girl was looking up at me with these huge brown eyes. She was being real quiet, but you could see she'd been crying. Her eyes were red and puffy, and her nose was all snotty right down to her lip, but she wasn't crying anymore, just sitting real quiet. She looked up at me, and she didn't really look scared of me. She didn't really look happy to see me either, though. She just looked confused, like she couldn't figure out the world at all in that minute. And let me tell you, I really know how that feels. I said, "What are you doing out here all by yourself?" But it was kind of a stupid thing to say because she was just a baby. I mean, not a baby, not a little baby, probably old enough to toddle around on her feet, but not the age of a kid who would answer me back in a full sentence. She just stared at me with those big eyes. "Where's your mommy?" "Mommy," she said, and wrinkled up her face like she was going to start crying again. "Oh, no, baby, don't cry, little girl. We'll find her. We'll find your mommy." She looked up at me with those big eyes again, and her face straightened out like maybe she could stop crying and believe me. Trouble was, I didn't know if what I just told her was true or not. And I could stop there. I could go a little farther. Yeah, that's probably a good 10 minutes, don't you think?
Yeah, but I feel like you were just about to get to
I know.
a really good part.
Well, yes, but the part I was just about to get to is about 60 pages long. So,
Okay.
but in a way that's good because I've like brought you up to a place where you're sort of, I don't know how many people have read it or haven't read it, but it brings me up to that place where you think, now I need to know what happens.
Oh yeah,
That's true.
that's a good
That's true.
stopping point.
So anyway,
All right.
not
So
to be cruel, but it is, I mean, it has been released. It's not
Okay.
like,
thank you for reading that.
Yeah, thank
Much
you.
appreciated.
if I read a little longer, you would say the same thing. You'd say, "Oh, now wait a minute. I just have to know where we're going."
Yeah. Well, now we're going to go into a Q&A. You can
Fair
ask
enough.
Catherine anything really. It could be about the book. It could be about a previous book. It could be about future stuff. It could be about society, politics, whatever you want. And we'll do it. If anyone has a question, just kind of shout it out. You can unmute yourself and
Yes,
speak
if you shout it out and don't unmute yourself, it's going to be a very quiet moment here.
it.
I don't tap dance, so somebody asks something. Well, I could, but then you'd be sorry you didn't think of a question. I'm just going to sit here and stare at y'all. Oh, Andrea's here. Hi, Andrea. And she just unmuted herself. Hi.
Hey, Catherine. It's nice to hear your voice.
Yeah, I've never heard
I
your
feel
voice.
like I know you from all the emails, but
Well, we do know each other. That's the thing. That's why I was telling people I have all these friends that I haven't met in person, but it's a real friendship.
I was just wondering if you were feeling frustrated about social media after you posted that thing the other day about needing to do better, and then all of a sudden it blew up and
You know,
became this whole
Yes,
thing.
I'm frustrated by social media, but not like for the first time or anything.
Yeah.
You know, I have a very specific way that I do social media. When I'm on Twitter, I talk about politics pretty consistently, and I'm quite opinionated about it because I'm quite opinionated. On Facebook, I don't, and I do that on purpose. First of all, they're two very different platforms in terms of the kind of people who hang out there. But the other thing is, this is basically where I go to interact with my readers. Some of my readers agree with me about politics and want to hear what I think. Others would potentially be offended by my politics and just want to talk to me about the books. So by dividing it up like that, people can kind of pick. You know, for people who weren't there, it was after George Floyd's death, but I wasn't only talking about that. I was talking about a whole bunch of things. But I just posted on Facebook, we need to do better, because I thought, who could possibly argue with the statement, we need to do better? And it isn't like something that somebody would say, you know, now you're not accepting me in my politics or whatever. And it immediately devolved into chaos and arguments. People made specific assumptions about what I was referring to and disagreed with me about it. I hadn't even said what I was referring. And it just kind of reminded me, oh, this is why I don't say anything controversial on Facebook. But that didn't feel that controversial to me. We need to do better. Is there really somebody out there that says, no, we're actually doing too well as it is? Not picturing it. So it was something when I said, when you say, am I discouraged? It just reminded me of something that I had already known, which is I am a very strong believer in saying what I think inappropriate, not inappropriate situations. I have had readers criticize me for it. I don't really care. I mean, I care, but it's not something that I would change. I am a believer in the most famous and most familiar quote that I know of by Elie Wiesel is, and I might not get it exactly right, we must always take sides. Silence. Something helps the oppressor, but never the oppressed. Silence helps the tormentor and never the victim. I believe that. I do not believe shutting up is the right answer. But I kind of do it on Facebook because you know what? Life is too short. Life is too short to get into one of those messes. But then again, 9 out of 10 people just offered their support at that. But Facebook can be a little bit of a weird place. Let's face it. Well, any place where people hang out can be kind of a weird place, but I'm weird too. So I'm not really removing myself from that equation. So I'm glad you're here. Yeah. I mean, it's good to see some of the people whose names I know so well. And maybe I've seen a still picture of you on Facebook, but this is better.
Yeah, it's fun to see you too. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah. No, it's my pleasure. Like I said, anything I can do from my easy chair, I'm so happy to do. Anything that doesn't involve getting on a plane or getting dressed up or, is a good thing.
It is.
Let's get some more questions, guys.
Sure. Somebody must be thinking something. Or comments or.
Where are Jordan and Ella right now?
Oh, that's a good question. Where are Jordan and Ella? Hey, Ella. She doesn't hear very well. Hang on just a second. Ella is the dog. Jordan is the cat. The cat is very funny. He's a big ham. When he sees that I'm on any kind of Zoom thing, he'd jump up on my lap and he'll walk around with his tail straight up going, hey, who are we talking to? Ella, it freaks her out a little that there are people in my computer. But I'm going to go ahead and put her through this anyway. Hang on just a second. Hey, Ella, come here. Come here, honey. I want you to meet some people. Come here. I want you to meet some people. Granted, she's not going to be terribly happy about this. She was sleeping on the bed. Say hi to the people, folk.
Ella.
Yeah, say hi, Ella. You okay? You always act so. She's a perfectly happy little dog. When I bring her on my lap and there are people, she can hear people talking, she's like, holy cow, get me out of here. And she looks like the most miserable little creature on the face of the earth. She's not. Just say a very, very, very quick hi. Thank you. All right, you're free.
She's shy.
Oh, she feels so much better. Something about, she likes people in person, but it really seems to freak her out that like she sees me in front of this computer all day. And for years, it never talked back. And now that it's talking back, she has not quite accepted that. She's just not quite, oh, this is funny. Now she's coming back and saying, you made me get on your computer and I want a treat for that. Seriously, she went and hid in the bedroom. Then she came back out and said, hey, wait a minute. I did something you wanted and I deserve a treat for that. She just got one. And
I
now,
see you keep them handy for whenever you.
oh yeah, oh, they're by my chair. If they weren't by my chair, I would get so much exercise. And this is Jordan. That's Jordan.
Wow.
And Jordan's there going like, who we talking to? He'll probably be up in a minute. So that's the answer to where Ella and Jordan are. I also have a horse named Soul. He does not live here. If I ever let him sit down on the love seat with Ella and Jordan, I would never get him up again. That would just so be his, that would so be his thing. He would be like, where are the snacks? What's on TV? He's a very easygoing guy.
So what inspired you to write Brave Girl, Quiet Girl?
I hope it doesn't sound like a cop out if I say I have absolutely no idea. Here comes my little ham. Here comes my little ham. Hey, little ham. Say hi. I don't know. First, he came up here and he was curious, but then when I tried to hold him up, he's like, that might be a bridge too far. The truth of the matter is, with very, very, very few exceptions, I do not know where these ideas come from. I know that I need a new idea. Here it comes. And usually when I'm going to sleep at night, cat, I'll just get this little flash in my head. I mean, I'm looking for something. Let's get this little flash in my head of put your butt down, kiddo, of a character, a fictional person with something going on. Usually I don't really know what's going on. Like, you know, with Stay, I'll see like a boy, and then there's his cabin in the woods. I don't know what the hell is in that cabin in the woods. I gotta figure that out over the next couple of weeks or months. And so there, you know, I think there's a tendency to assume that I've been inspired by some real life events, which is very reasonable because, and the other assumption that I get is that my characters are based on people I know, which is reasonable and logical because most people do not have fictional people running around in their heads and totally fictional stories running around in their heads. But I actually do. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Well, I've certainly turned it into its best self. On rare occasions, I will see some little subplot or just an odd little detail that was something I saw in real life, because sometimes you see stuff in real life that you just couldn't make up. I mean, life has some things that, you know the old saying, you can't make this stuff up. But for the most part, I don't really know where these stories come from. It is like purely from the ether. It's kind of the classic author's question, where do you get your ideas? And the reason people still ask it after all this time is we have never answered you to your satisfaction. And the reason we haven't answered you to your satisfaction is because we have no idea. Somebody asked Harlan Ellison, where do your ideas come from? And his answer was Schenectady. You know, I always thought that was a great answer. I mean, it's as good an answer as any. So Schenectady, or I don't know, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, or I heard somebody talking. Jan is unmuted.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, like, there's a BBC documentary about a old blues player from the South who said in the 40s and 30s, in the sort of 40s and 50s, when they used to get catalogs from the big companies, they used to get them delivered to the sort of swampland kind of places, and they used to invent stories about the people, the sort of like models in the catalogs. So that sounds like a little bit like the sort of storytelling.
I hadn't seen that. Yeah, I know.
I'll try and put it.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'll try. I'll put the link on the chat if I can find it. Yeah.
Okay.
Catherine, do you think maybe your ideas come from a spiritual realm?
Who asked that? Just so I know.
Ruth.
Oh, hi, Ruth. Oh, Ruth, hi.
Hi.
I don't see your video, but I hear you. So anyway,
I don't have a camera.
I do think that's possible. And if so, I can't really explain it. I did tell my agent, we were having a conversation about how I was able to produce 2 books a year. Well, partly I just write fast and I always have, and that's just how I write. I'm not rushing to get 2 books a year out. That's just how I do it. I just finally found a publisher who would keep up with me. But she was talking about how I was getting so many stories. And I said, the only thing I know for a fact is that it's non-local. I'm kind of borrowing a phrase from a wonderful quantum physicist. I'm trying to think, he did a great documentary and it was called the quantum, I think it was something like the quantum activist or something like that. And he used the phrase, and it's the only place I've heard it, non-local energy, which I kind of interpret as being something along the lines of the collective unconscious. I do think I have no idea how it works. I cannot tell you I particularly understand it, but things kind of come to me, not literally fully formed, but because I need many more details. But when I find, notice I say when I find the details, not when I make up the details. When I find the details, it feels more like I'm stumbling on something than making something up. It's like I'll get a piece of the story and I'll think, oh, that's what happened. You know, a particularly good example of that, the one you have not read yet because it's not coming out until December. It's called My Name is Anton. Some of you may have heard of it just because I showed the cover to my readers and stuff like that. And when that story first came to me, I saw this young man, Anton, and all of a sudden I realized, I thought, well, that's interesting. He only has one hand. And then I completely dismissed that. I'm like, no, he has 2 hands. And then I sat with it a while longer and I'm like, no, he only has 1 hand. And I'm going to have to figure out what happened to that other hand. Again, I wasn't like, I'll make something up. I was like, why does he only have 1 hand? So that's kind of an example of how things come to me, and I don't really feel all that responsible. It would be really nice if people could kind of explain imagination, but it's not an easy thing to do. I asked somebody once in an audience who was really kind of persistent about where ideas come from. I said, when's the last time you had an idea and where was it before you had it? She found that to be a very strange question. She's like, where was it before I had it? I'm like, see how impossible that is? It can't be done. So yeah.
I was on a I was going to say, like, I was on a Zoom call about Plato, and he posed that question, but he made it an impossible question.
Plato posed that question
on Zoom. Yeah.
Yeah. I think he was trying to I mean, God knows what he's trying to do, actually. But yeah, it's a good question.
I had no idea that Zoom had been around that long. But boy, we're sure glad it's here now, aren't we? Anybody else? We got quite a bit of time left.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What do you think of the movie Pay It Forward, based off of your book, obviously?
How much time have we got? I don't know if we got that much time left. I don't hate it. I put out that initial answer, so I hated it. I don't. It was not a faithful adaptation by any means. It's doing the elevator butt here on my lap. And there was a lot that I don't like about it. You know, a movie is, I'm sure you've all noticed that movies tend not to live up to their books, with a few exceptions. There are reasons for that. And I think I caught on to some of them during the process of adaptation. One reason is that, you know, love it or hate it, a book is one person's creative process. And a movie is kind of like the textbook definition of too many cooks in the kitchen. I also think, and funny, who was I talking to? Oh, I know. I was talking to somebody who was potentially going to option one of my books. And we were talking about this, and I said, I think Mimi Leader, the director, lost control of her set. And she said, oh, there is no doubt about that. She apparently knew more about it than I did. So I think there were a lot of things that went wrong, but I think the main thing about a movie is that you gather $50 million from investors, and the rest of your life pretty much depends on whether or not you recover it for them. So there's a lot of second guessing. There's a lot of playing it safe.
Yeah.
A couple things I did not like about the movie. I did not like the fact that they turned my African-American Vietnam vet hero protagonist into a white guy. And by the way, I met Kevin Spacey and I pointed out to him that he was a white guy. And he didn't seem particularly surprised. Fortunately, he knew I was kidding. Well, I mean, I wasn't kidding. He is a white guy, but I mean, you know, he kind of took it in the spirit in which it was intended. So I felt, okay, I'm trying to think how deeply to go into this, but I might as well. When they decided that they would go with Kevin Spacey, which I kind of understood because his name is Mud now, but he was coming on this movie right on the heels of American Beauty.
Yeah.
He was a big deal.
Yeah.
And I understood why they would want to get a big deal actor. So I got that. But they told me that they would do quite a few other things to make sure that there was a good kind of a racial balance in the film. And one of them was the guy who gave away the car at the beginning would be African American, and the principal of the school would also be. Well, the principal ended up on the cutting room floor. You see her in the very last scene where people are gathered, but you don't know who the hell she is because she ended up on the cutting room floor. And the guy who gave away the car is Mimi Leader's husband. So I kind of came out with the impression that there could have been more racial sensitivity used in that adaptation. And then there are some things I did like about it. Like, for example, I think that it introduced the idea of pay it forward well. And I think that people who see the movie have a similar chance to be inspired by the pay it forward idea as people who read the book. And since this was a rare example of a fairly neat, compact idea that I was hoping would catch on, then I think that the movie did the movement a service. I tried to be very circumspect about this while it was going on. It's not easy. It's very difficult with the press pulling you back and forth and terrible reviews of the movie and people putting that off on the book when they haven't even read the book. I mean, the whole adaptation process was extremely surreal. But I tried to, I had this feeling that I did not want to be one of those people who got everything they always said they wanted and still wasn't happy. Because, you know, a movie, that's kind of the brass ring for an author. Everybody wants the big screen movie adaptation. So if you get that and you're still miserable, then what do you want, you know? So Jacqueline Machard, I actually didn't know her at the time. I know her a little bit now. I reviewed one of her books and we talk back and forth sometimes, but at the time I'd never met her, but somebody that I knew, this was about years ago when people had fax machines. I had a fax machine upstairs. Somebody faxed me this article about Jacqueline Machard, and you know, her Deep End of the Ocean was adapted. And the first thing I saw was the sidebar quote from her that said, "Where I come from, you can either take the money or you can moan about the process, but not both." And I decided that was going to be my motto for the movie. And it's very helpful, I think, to look at your book and their movie as entirely separate business entities. Like, people will say to me, doesn't it drive you crazy that they're changing your book? And that I know it's just the way you phrase a thing, but it shows a kind of a deep misunderstanding. And I will perplex people sometimes by saying, open my book and tell me if it's changed. They didn't change my book. It's word for word what it was. They made their movie.
Right.
If I mentioned that there's something that is potentially optioned now, if this happened, it would be much smaller, not the big studio production. It would probably be more of like a streaming or, you know, direct to streaming kind of a television oriented thing.
Yeah.
I would actually kind of welcome that at this point.
Mm.
You know, I've had the big splashy one, and I know what's good about it and I know what's bad about it. That may be more than you even wanted to know. The movie is one of those things that you have to kind of file under don't get me started.
That was
Because
interesting.
Yeah.
okay. I mean, like I say, I mean, I try to look at it for what it really is. I'm not sorry it happened.
Right.
For everything I don't like about it, if somebody said to me, hey, this major studio wants to make another one of your books, sure, I'd let them do it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Most people know that most people think the book is better than the movie. It draws a lot of people to your book. That many more people will read it.
Yeah. That's a good
And I sort of figure the very worst that can happen is if they make just the most awful movie in the history of the world, then people would just say, oh, don't even bother with the movie. Just read the book. The book was much better. And this hurts the author how? There's not a huge downside to it, except sort of ego wise, but I try to let things like that go.
Hmm.
Some days it's easier than others.
Which of your books would you want to see turned into a movie if you could pick one?
The one that is current, that has some current possibilities going on, is Luis Velez. In some ways, that's the one I would most like to see made. In other ways, the person who optioned it had to convince me that because that's another one that if you has it mentions a lot of race. It not mentions, it addresses a lot of race and societal issues, and I kind of wanted a guarantee that it would not, well, there's no guarantee, but an assurance that it would not be done insensitively. And I believe that the woman who likes it for the right reasons. So that's the one probably most likely to be made. In terms of what I think would make a good movie, I think maybe one of the road trips like Take Me With You or Ally and B would be just super, because they're set against the backdrop of this just unbelievably amazing places. And other than that, I'm not saying nothing else happens in them, but other than that, they're fairly quiet stories about people just getting to know each other better and getting more comfortable with each other and kind of forming these unlikely bonds. And in a way, that's kind of a lot to ask of the reader, because these fabulous backdrops are only described, they can only be imagined. But it just seems to me that to actually put that on the big screen would be something. So we'll see. People say to me all the time, oh, is this one would make a great movie. Every time a book comes out, people say, oh, this one would make a great movie. And I always say that's interesting that in your mind, they made it into a great movie. Because in my mind, I don't know what they're going to make it into, you know? It's like people imagined it as just the best movie possible. But like I say, there's a lot to be said for being adapted. And I'm not sneezing at it, but I'm being honest about the fact that it is a very double-edged sword. Probably the hardest thing about it is just people thinking everything in the movie was your idea.
Mm.
I had a guy who wrote to me for a while who was very angry about something in the movie. Like, his thing was, well, women do that even more than men, and I can prove it. And I'm like, that wasn't even in my book. I didn't write that. And it didn't really stop him. So, you know, it's I don't know. It's kind of bizarro world, but I figure if that's the worst thing you got to complain about, you need better problems. At the time that I was being adapted, my friends were all the same friends I'd had when I was struggling to get published the first time. And if you want to get everything back in perspective, complain to your struggling author friends about your big screen adaptation.
It's a
And
great
they will
movie.
play the world's smallest violin for you and put you right back where you belong. It was really quite valuable. Anybody else? We got a good 15 minutes left and a lot of people. It's fine if you want to just listen quietly.
Gail, you
Um,
Were you
Catherine,
raising your hand, Gail?
Was
Okay.
of your
Hi.
20 plus novels that you've written.
38, but who's counting?
38. I'm sorry.
No,
Excuse
no,
me.
it's fine. It's fine. I'm counting. That's the answer.
Right.
You don't need to. It's not your job to count.
Which one would be the one that you would be most proud of or recommend to someone? Is there any one in particular or two in particular
Louis
that?
Velez.
Okay, I've read that one. I was hoping
Louis
you would give
Velez
me-
is my personal favorite so far.
Okay.
I like them all in different ways, kind of like, well, hopefully nobody has 38 kids, but, kind of like if you got a bunch of kids, it's not really that you love one better than the other, but your relationship with all of them is going to be different. For years, it was Becoming Chloe. For some reason, I just kind of had a heart connection with the characters in Becoming Chloe and the subject, kind of the overarching theme, which is, for those of you who haven't read it, is how do you love being in a world that's such a tough world? And yet, isn't that kind of our job, is to find what to value about our lives? And I still really like that book, but now that was from, I think it was published in 2007. I don't know when I wrote it. And I like to think the time marches on and I do better things. Now, there are some people who like my older stuff better, and that's certainly their prerogative, but I think that I'm moving forward, and that I've had a couple released since Louis Velez that I like just fine and are getting great reactions from readers, but they don't have that same place in my heart that Louis Velez does for some reason. And that was also one that spilled out of me very fast. I write 2 books a year, almost like it was just almost a hole in there and just waiting to get out. I write 2 books a year, so I take less than 6 months to write a book. In the past, it took me pretty dependably about 5 months, and I think I've maybe gotten that down a little bit. I think I finished the whole draft of that in 3 months. It just happened. And in the past, I have discovered that is generally a good sign. Usually the more you have to wrestle with it, the more trouble you're in, for me anyway.
Mm.
Everybody's process is different, so. Not hearing anything from Jan. I know you're there.
It's just Jan's
Okay.
iPhone.
I guess I'm not. Yeah, right. Well, maybe Jan's iPhone has a question. I don't know. I just assumed that Jan was behind Jan's iPhone, but I could be wrong.
Catherine, the
Yes.
first book you wrote, Funerals for Horses.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm
Who is
Ruth.
this? I thought it was Pat, but Ruth again. Okay, hi.
Yeah. The
I can't
Funerals
see
for
Ruth
Horses
moving, so I'll
book
get
that you
confused.
wrote, your
Yes.
first book, the character of the woman that rode out looking for her brother.
Yeah, Ella.
I thought that would make a you talked about movies, a really cool movie too, because of where it takes place when she's riding on
That
the
is
Navajo
some
Nation.
beautiful country.
Yes.
That is some beautiful country up kind of on the way to Monument Valley in the sort of painted desert area. Boy, I sure love that part of the world.
Yeah, I do too. And I think that was one of, well, the first book I read other than Pay It Forward of yours. Did you know that there's women that ride cross country like just for the experience of doing it?
No, I did.
There's a book
On the
called
same horse all the way across?
Yes. Well, she took 2 horses, a pack
Okay.
horse and
Yeah,
her
okay.
regular horse, and she had a little
I've heard of
dog.
traveling that way, yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds absolutely terrifying to me.
She
And don't get me wrong, I ride, but I mean, just the idea of just going all the way across the country and just introducing your horse to every single thing that he will meet out there sounds absolutely terrifying. And my horse is pretty darn mellow.
Yeah, she picked her horses very carefully because
Oh,
they
I
had
can
to
imagine.
be
Yeah.
really strong and I can't remember the breed.
Yeah,
But
and there's a lot of infrastructure that would be needed. I mean, you have to stop them where there's water. You have to know how you're going to confine them for the night. It
right,
sounds
she planned
really
it all
involved.
out, and she
Yeah.
rode. Oh, it was over 2,000 miles. And as far as I know, she's still alive. And she wrote a book about it, and it's called Lady Long Rider.
Oh, interesting. I
And
might like
her name
that,
is
actually.
Bernice. It's got lots of cool
Long
pictures in it.
Rider.
Bernice, her last name's Ende or something, Ende. And she's done it twice, riding
Wow.
across country, and she plans it out, and then
I will
she'll
not be
end.
doing that, by the way.
Yeah, she ends up in people's little towns, and they take care of her.
Yeah,
So
you would almost need that. I did read a very interesting book, nonfiction book. I think it was called A Standard Journey, which is kind of a strange name for the book, but her horses were standard breds. Like they went out and got these off the track trotters and used 4 of them for this journey. It's incredibly hairy. They didn't even end, I think it was in Australia, and they didn't end up going nearly as far as they planned. But it really shows you some of the things you're up against. I don't know if they chose those horses very, very carefully.
well, this woman knew what she was doing and got advice on which horse breed to choose.
I thought when I first got a horse again that I would love to do something like maybe just take a little chunk, a little section of something like the Pacific Crest Trail and, do a few days along a trail with a horse and maybe, a pack animal or something like that. And now that I know how much can go wrong, I would just feel so responsible for my horse with wild animals out there, with the possibility of him being injured or me being injured. That's a little too rich for my blood. Maybe if I was 18, I would think I was absolutely indestructible and I would get up and do that. But I'm 65 and I got a horse again after riding at various points in my life. I got a horse again when I was 60. And I'm very big on telling people that riding a horse in your 60s is brave, period. It's an adventure. I do not
Amen.
need anything to make it more adventurous for me. It's an adventure just because he's 16 and a half hands off the ground. That's enough. And he is a very mellow guy, let me tell you.
Yeah, it's a risk you take, and you just decide it's a
And
risk worth taking.
I've done a tremendous amount of long distance hiking, peak hiking, really going out into the wilderness, sometimes by myself, though I was very careful about how I did it. But I felt comfortable taking that risk for myself. I just don't know if I would feel as comfortable taking that risk for a horse.
Well, it would
Right.
be as dire
Yeah.
for your horse if something happened to you as if something happened to him. So
Exactly. If
Yeah.
anybody gets hurt, it's an absolute disaster for both of you. That's really true. Marcia is also a horse person, so I can see her kind of nodding because really, until you get involved, horses, I think, are kind of like having a puppy or having a baby, in that however hard you think it is, you don't know yet. I mean, you think you know how hard it's going to be. No, you don't until you do it. Just the number of things that potentially could go wrong. We're talking about a 1,300-pound animal in the case of my horse. I adore him. But like I say, just having a horse is enough adventure for me. And obviously, I'm going to take fewer risks than I did when I was much younger. Maybe many things, but I am not young at this point. I don't feel particularly old. I still have plenty of energy. I still do a lot. I'm just realistic about where I am in my life. Some things I will still do, and other things are just, I don't still do the going out into the wilderness and the all-day hikes. Or the last time I did a really, really major trek was 2016, and I knew when I was out there that was my swan song. I'm so glad I did it. I went to Nepal. I flew to Kathmandu, I had a guide and a porter. I was not on my own in this by any means. And we took one of those little, what they call the short takeoff and landing planes into Lukla, which is where the mountain climbers fly into Mount Everest. They call it the world's most dangerous airport. That much adventure I will take. I figure most of those planes make it just fine. Occasionally they don't, but most of the time they do. And I did a 3-day up, 2-day back trek up to a place. I didn't go up to base camp. That is too high. That's almost 17,000 feet. I went up to a place called the Hotel Everest View, which is this very odd combination of luxury and you're in the middle of nowhere hotel, sitting on this cliff looking up over Mount Everest in a place where by all rights there should be nothing but a tent. How they got all that, it's just unbelievable that they could put a hotel up there. And we stopped in nice little inns overnight along the trail and stuff like that. But I knew while I was doing it, I mean, you're up at 13,000 feet. It's harder to breathe. The hiking gets cumulative from one day to the next. And I just thought, I'm so glad I did this. And when I get home, I'm not walking anywhere, and that's all there is to it. So anyway, I do have time for another question or two if
Yeah, we
anybody's
take
got
one
one.
more question.
Catherine,
Yes.
this is Jan.
Jan. Hey, Jan. We kept seeing Jan's iPhone, but we couldn't hear Jan.
Well, I kept trying to unmute it, and I
Oh,
was
okay.
afraid I
Well, you
would
got
lose
it.
you,
Good.
and I didn't want to lose you.
Well, thank you.
Yes,
I'm glad that you
Yep.
figured out how to be heard
and not lose you.
and not lose me.
Right. So your books have wonderful messages in them. So where do they come from?
Observations about human nature. I mean, like everybody else, when you watch the way people operate, you read the news, you see where we are as a society, people are fascinating. Not always in a good way, sometimes in a good way. We're just fascinating creatures. I mean, if people ever just stepped up and said exactly what they thought and told you exactly what they wanted, it'd be a fabulous world to live in, but I would be out of a job because that does not lend itself to fiction in any way. So I'm interested in so many things like other people are. I mean, I think everybody must wonder, why do we say we're not scared when we are? Why do we say we're not angry when we are? Why do we treat a whole set of people different than the way we treat, why do we do what we do? And why don't we do what we don't do? I don't think I'm the only person making these observations, but I think my way of kind of dealing with it is I come up with a sort of perplexing question. Like, why can't we do better on something like this? If you see a kid who's falling through the cracks, why wouldn't you catch that kid? Does it really matter if it's your kid? Why isn't there somebody who says, I will catch that kid, even though it's not my kid? He's not, or she's not my kid. And so what happens is, being a novelist, those questions end up being a full-length novel. And the idea is not that I will answer them, because if they were questions easily answered, I couldn't get a whole novel out of them. The idea is that I kind of pose the question publicly and get you to think about it with me, which is absolutely fascinating for someone like me. Like, I put out what I wonder, and then you email me and say, yeah, I wondered about that too. And so it's a kind of communication that I guess lets me sort of work out what I don't understand about the world. Does that make sense?
It does.
And there's
Thank
a
you.
lot I don't understand about the world, like everybody.
I think there's a lot that you teach the world.
Well, I appreciate that. I try not to write books that are didactic, if you know what I mean. Like, I don't want to step up and say, here's you know, I am wise and here's the message I have for you. But I do hope that, I think what I'm trying to do, maybe even more so than teach, although that's not a bad word, I'm not saying you're wrong, is to kind of shed light on what it means to be human in a way that's both positive and negative, but in a way that doesn't make people feel bad about being human. A lot of times when we talk about being human, we're acting like that's the bad news. I don't necessarily think that's the bad news. I think there's a way to shed light on a person trying to have a decent life that makes us feel that where we recognize it, we go, yes, I'm human too, so I feel that, but that doesn't make us feel like being human is a bad condition. That's kind of what I'm going for, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jan.
Well, we're gonna end there.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Catherine. That was
Yeah, thank you,
really
Catherine.
super
Thank
interesting
you.
and engaging for everyone.
Absolutely my pleasure.
And yeah, it's just really an honor and pleasure to have you on.
Yeah.
Thanks for everyone who tuned in. You guys really make the event, so
Yeah, thank
it
you.
means
It's
a
nice
lot
to
that
see
you
all
guys.
these familiar faces.
Yes, and hope to see you guys next time we host different kinds of cultural events. Lots of free stuff on Zoom, so keep track of us.
Okay, thanks.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Catherine.
Bye, Catherine.
Bye-bye.
Bye.